good evening. What a privilege to be here. And I feel so thankful, and I just want to spill over all of the thanks that I feel to the Plowshares 8, to the Nuclear Resistor, to Nukewatch, to all the many people who are the reason why we're able to be here tonight, surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses. There was a time in my life when I surely didn't think that I'd be headed in this particular direction, and I'd just like to tell you that maybe one of the most important jobs of my life came at that time. I worked in a meatpacking factory in Chicago, and I would wear goggles and a yellow rubber apron and combat boots and a white frock that was soon covered with blood, and my job was to sling pork loins. I had a big T-hook that was made out of steel, and I'd stand on a milk crate in front of this vat full of very frozen pork loins and sling a loin onto the conveyor belt and do it again and again, and 8 hours later I think I'd probably recited every memorized prayer I'd ever known and anything I could do to hang on to some sanity in this job. And sometimes I'd get a break from that, and I'd put little metal chips behind Canadian pork butts to make sure they'd stay square. And sometimes I'd get a break from that and operate a machine where you hit a pedal and you shot some waste material into a tube to make hot dogs. So I did and hence I became a vegetarian. But if anyone had said to me at any point in my life then or after, until really about 3 months ago, Kathy Kelly, you slaughtered animals, I would have said, I did not. Honestly, it never occurred to me, unless I put it in the perspective, well, I had a lot more to do with slaughtering animals than anyone else on Normandy Avenue on Chicago's southwest side at that time. Most assuredly, I was a part of the Rose Packing Company's process of slaughter. And I'm very, very sorry. And I think that we, in all our honesty and our goodness, can and should and must say, no, we're not a part of the slaughter of war. And yet, globally, we also know that we live quite well and comfortably, and on and on and on, the grinding horror of war continues. I was in Pakistan, and I would have sworn that somehow Ernest Bromley came back to visit us in the person of a tall, lanky, I'm going to use the word statesman, or stateswoman it could have been, but this was Dr. Mubashir Hassan. And he had so many of Ernest's qualities, and I really love this man, and I've had a chance now to visit with him twice. And he's a former finance minister of Pakistan, and he really is a pacifist. He loves Gandhi, and he practically recited verbatim the 5th chapter of the Brothers Karamazov and the Grand Inquisitor. But he's so smart, and he, I guess, almost couldn't help but lay out for us some of the realities. And he expressed it as though almost like a choreography, what you can expect, that the Taliban figures out that they're never going to be able to go after the United States militarily, and so the Taliban instead starts to hit where it would hurt in terms of people who might eventually raise enough of a fuss to try to get the United States out of Pakistan. And so, as you saw just most recently, they hit the shrine where the young people go because they love the drumming, the Sufi shrine. He described how the United States knows that it can't hit the Taliban right in Afghanistan where they live because the whole towns and villages tend at times to be part of Taliban groups. And so the United States starts to develop the drone technology. And you see people using, right in the heat of combat, their wits and their smarts and their intelligence so they can figure out how they can position themselves to kill people more effectively, to be engaged in slaughter. And he said, we must try to find new ways to go forward. And he laid out all the problems we face, that China and Pakistan are now forming a deal so that Pakistan gets 2 nuclear reactors that will be installed by China. And he was able to talk about the weapons race going on in space as well. The man could comprehend it all. And at the end of it, he said to us, please, don't prolong our agony. Let us go through ourselves. We'll make mistakes, but leave us alone. And then it was as though he didn't want to burn a bridge. He wanted to make a bridge for all of us. And so he said to us, maybe there is some hope. Maybe people will somehow see the consequences of war and want to put an end to it. And he gave a soft, sweet smile. So this evening I'd like to tell you a few more of those consequences of war-type stories. And they're ones that really caught me in the deep hearts core. I spent a lot of time, in a short amount of time in Afghanistan. I was there only a week. But Josh Brolier and I spent a good deal of time in a hospital run by the Italian Emergency NGO. It's an NGO called Emergency. And it was a beautiful hospital, really. And on cool, breezy days, the young boys wearing their thin white hospital gowns, age 7 up to 21, would go outside on the hospital grass amid the flowers. And they'd come out, they'd be limping, they'd be wearing braces, they'd have their crutches. And most of them had suffered because of landmine explosions, because of detonations of the IEDs, because of bullets, because of attacks. And they'd limp together, and then they'd help one another, set a sheet down on the ground, and gently help one another sit down on the ground. And little Esmatullah was the youngest, 7 years old, and he'd have a beaming smile on his face whenever someone would come to visit him. And he was hit by a mine when it exploded, and the physical therapist would pat him on the head and say, he's never once cried during all the dressing changes. He's been with us months and he's never cried. Ah, he's a real Pashtun. And then Esmatullah would just grin and beam up at the physical therapist. And then there was Adidullah, and he had lost 4 fingers and an eye. He was playing with a mine, trying to take it apart, thinking he might get the brass inside and maybe be able to sell it because his family was impoverished and it blew up on him. And then there was Nur Saeed, and he was saying his prayers in the mosque. He doesn't know which side hit him, but his leg was shattered. And then there was a boy named Saifuddin, and he was older, but when he was 18 years old, growing up in the village of Panjshir, and I'd gone to visit this village, and it's a very desperately poor place. Brenda could also tell you about it. Families have 10 to 15 children, and I think you may know that 850 children in Afghanistan die every day. 850 of Afghanistan's children die every day. Over a fourth won't live to be over age 5. So he wanted to help his family, and so he became one of the 7,000 drivers who take their lives in their hands and take the risk of driving for the United States convoys that bring food and supplies and goods to the bases, to the U.S. soldiers. And it's a very, very exceedingly dangerous trip. And I guess, you know, he was taking his chances every single day. He made it through his 18th, his 19th, his 20th year. He was making money for his family. When he was 21, he went over an IED. You know, in these convoys, they give a GPS system to the front car with military officials from the U.S., and the last car with military officials gets the GPS. But the cars in the middle, driven by the Afghan drivers, don't get those kinds of warning systems. When he went over the IED under the ground, it exploded, and it shattered his arm and his leg. And the United States military picked him up and took him to the Italian emergency hospital that gives care free of charge. And he's never heard from them again. The Italians took him from their hospital in Lashkar up to the hospital in Kabul for surgery, and it was then that I met him, and this has been a very long process, and he's got a long way ahead of him. And he said to us, you know, there are many things I could tell you, but I am afraid to speak them to you because harm could come to me. But believe me, we saw the ISAF forces kill many people for no reason at all.